I'd like to call the meeting of the Texas County, Arkansas Board of Directors to order. If you would please, just a couple of courtesy things. If you have your cell phone, make sure that you silence your cell phone. If you wish to address the board tonight, we have citizens communication cards on the ledge. You don't have to fill one of those out now, but if you would, that would be helpful for us. You can get that to our city clerk. You'll be recognized during our citizens communication time. That's coming up towards the end of our meeting. At this time, we'll have the roll call.
Director Hollibush.
Here.
Director Odom.
Here.
Director Minor.
Here.
Director Peavy.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Teeters.
Here.
Director Harris.
Here.
Mayor Brown.
Here. Okay, at this time, we'll stand and have our invocation and the pledge of allegiance given by Director Barbara.
Thank you, and pray with me. Lord, we just thank you so much for this day and the blessings that you have showered upon us. There are decisions to be made, and we thank you that we can meet together and come to some conclusions about different matters. Guide and direct us in all these things that we need to know. Guide us and direct us in the relations that we have with each other and our citizens. In Jesus' name I pray these things. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we have a presentation to a city employee. That would be Ms. Hortense Foster, and she has 20 years with TAPD. I believe she's here. She's here. Thank you very much. At this time, we'll move into our agenda with the consent agenda. Item number 2 on the consent agenda is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on August the 19th. And the number 3 is to adopt a resolution to reschedule the 2020 regular Board of Directors meetings that conflict with city-approved holidays. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second. Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Moving right along to our regular agenda tonight, item number 4 is to adopt an ordinance to establish the revised competitive pay rules and to regain and maintain a competitive pay package for the Texas County, Arkansas civil service employees, which would be its third reading. It's the recommendation of the staff to request a table of this item indefinitely due to a separate competitive pay ordinance for fire and police being considered tonight. So do I hear a motion to table this particular ordinance indefinitely?
So moved.
Go ahead, that's fine. Is this the same ordinance that was tabled 2 weeks ago?
No.
No, okay.
It had been, some changes had been made.
Okay, my apologies, that's making sure.
Okay. So we have a motion to table indefinitely?
Yes.
Okay,
So
we have a
moved.
second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for table indefinitely. Could you call the roll, please?
Hollibush.
Yes.
Odom.
Here.
Minor.
Yes.
Peavy.
Yes.
Teeters.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes. Okay, moving right along to item number 5 is to adopt an ordinance to establish competitive pay rules and to regain and maintain a competitive pay package for the Texas County, Arkansas civil service fire employees. Finance Director Tyronda Henderson.
Good afternoon, Mayor Brown, Dr. Haskins, and Board of Directors. There has just been a slight modification to items 5 and item 6. They are now 2 separate ordinances, one for fire and one for police. The major change is at 62 days of fund balance, a increase of up to 2.5% will be given. Are there any questions?
So it went from, it was a 60, 65, so now it's a 62? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then the 2 to 3 has split and gone to 2.5?
Yes.
Okay. And the holiday pay had already been taken out
Correct.
on the other reading, so those were the 3 points that we were working on?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Want to make sure these 2 were on the new one and the other ones. Okay. Thank you,
Yes.
that's all I have.
Director Harris?
Yes, what area, I know one time it was talking about an area of 50 miles, is that still in consideration?
The region is still considered 50 miles. Or
How's
Church
that?
County MSA, yes, sir.
How did they come about?
They're, part of what the police associated wanted was the Church County region, and William Region had near the MSA, and it was the same thing. It was like a 50-mile area.
So that basically we still gonna be considered with, 50 mile would be from Ashdown to Boston, Texarkana, Texas,
D-Queen.
Marsh would be 56. So basically still going also city with Texarkana, Texas.
We're comparing with cities in a 50-mile radius.
This would be considered the region. That's the language that's in the ordinance, Director Harris, and
Mr. Mayor Brown,
Yes, sir.
I was talking to her, no, I would prefer her to answer the question, and if I wanted to direct at him, then he would
So-
be able to answer the
so
question.
noted.
So, would you continue?
It's a 50-mile area, which is considered the region.
Okay, and I know about 2 board meetings ago, I had read out some information, and I kind of did a small snapshot of this. I'm not going to read all of this, but I'm just going to, and then my other thing is, one more question, man. Soon as they get 62 days, just say if we get 62 days tomorrow, who would make the request in for, to do whether you give a raise or not give a raise? When's the time?
As stated in the ordinance, it'll be during the budget process.
Budget.
Yes, sir.
And during odd years, even years, the reason I'm saying odd years is I think when Mayor Brown brought up the situation, he brought up the first time we would consider this in 2021. If you can correct me, Mayor Brown, if I'm putting.
That proposal in itself did not get in the ordinance on it. That was consideration for a every other year basis. This consideration will be given in 2020.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's on an
So-
annual basis.
Okay, and my question is that if it was given in this, technically it can be given this year based on, we come up with 62 days of, and what I'm getting to, just say for instance, I guess when the property tax is being paid, it's mostly gonna be being paid around October. And when will we get that notice, as how much property tax we get?
We'll get our major property tax payments in October, November timeframe, but this is based upon the budgeted fund balance, which is at 71 days currently. And so that's what it will be based upon, is
Okay.
what the budgeted fund balance is.
And it doesn't have to do with just say the end of the year, everybody decides to shop in Texarkana, go across the line and shop. How would that affect?
If we were to do it that way, we will be looking at it on almost a monthly basis. Because our sales tax and our property tax levels change from month to month, and those projections can change on a monthly basis also. So it's easier if we're able to take a snapshot at one time during the year and then look at it at that time.
Okay, and then Mayor, I'm found with this, I'm gonna do I'm not gonna go over all of this, but something what I had did 2 years, I would say 2 weeks ago, that when I had did the general property tax, I was comparing Arkansas to Texas, with Arkansas was $2,626,500, where Texas property tax is $13,991,078. And within the sales tax, when compared to Arkansas, our sales tax is $9,571,803, where Texarkana, Texas is $16,704,658. and then I'm gonna go on down to, that's basically the biggest thing, and I'm not gonna read, again, franchise receipt, I'm gonna go over there, I was $2,777,535, which Texas is $1,460,750. And the bottom line that our revenue is for the Arkansas side is yearly, based on this year, is $19,197,000 and $783, with Texas $34,878,000 and $544,000. And the bottom line, and I need to make sure this bring this out, with Texas, they do theirs from October to October, where theirs is from October the 18th to October the 19th, and they police is representing 27% of their budget, which is $8,931,881. With our, if you look at 2018, it roughly was 42%. And that's the police side, and that's in 2018. In 2019, it was 41% at $8,001,953. Now the fire is just a little bit different. Our fire in 2018 represent 27% of our budget for 2018, and it was in 2019 it represents 26% of our budget at $5,095,269, where Texarkana, Texas, they also include emergency management, and Delson represents 16% of their budget, and Delson is, for 2018, 2019 is $6,562,537. And the forecast for Texas side police department, in 2020 gonna be about $63,000, and in 2022 it's gonna roughly be $9,308,000, and the firemen's gonna basically increase in 2020 $6,006,042, and in 2022 roughly gonna be $6,796,000. And I'm just saying, and then our sales tax is 10.25%, West Texas 8.2, West Texas County, Texas 8.25. I'm just trying to let the public that where the challenge is gonna be at, and when we trying to meet what's stated here. So, and I think that both sides, I don't think that this really never was given no public notice, that more like, I can't tell the Gazette what they write, but they mostly wrote about they mostly run like this board was doing the police wrong in matter of sense as to about this. And and what I'm trying to show is, if we have the money, I don't see no reason why, but the way we you got to get the money to pay somebody, and just showing what kind of that the playing field is really not level when you really compare it to Texarkana, Arkansas, when it comes down to a finance standpoint. And that's the point I'm trying to bring across to the public, and that's about it.
Thank you, Director.
Thank
Does
you.
anyone have any questions of Ms. Henderson? So the intent would be to have the ordinance read 3 times tonight to pass. Then there would be a motion to adopt the ordinance. As we get to the motion to adopt the ordinance, at that time, we'll ask for any comments from the public or from the board prior to voting. So the intent is to read the ordinance 3 times, and then prior to that, we'll ask for a motion. I'll ask for a motion to adopt. And at that time, if there's any questions from the public or anywhere, will be addressed at that time. Okay? So having said that, if there's no other questions from the board, then I would entertain a motion to have this ordinance read on its first reading.
Can I ask one
Yes.
question? Since we've read the ordinance in its entirety on a couple of occasions, is it possible to just, not say abbreviated form, but to just read the changes that have been made so that we don't read the entire thing again that didn't change. Is that, or do we need to read the whole thing?
I've read the ordinance 3 million times, so
Exactly.
I'm for reading it in its abbreviated form, but I do understand. The biggest difference is certainly the fund balance differences. The city attorney may not be that familiar with the changes, but I would leave that up to him as to how you want to proceed and read it.
Respectfully, I don't have a red line version of it here, so I would be hesitant to say I can pick out every change
Okay.
that's been made. I understand that it substantially follows the other with respect to those changes in the business points that you've brought out. But, so I would say read it in its entirety or the abbreviated fashion. Do it that manner.
So it's the desire of the board. We'll entertain a motion to have it read on its first reading, either in its abbreviated form or its entirety. So the floor is open for a motion.
Mayor, unless it's in the abbreviated form, I think it's ready for the first reading right now.
Let's read it.
An ordinance to establish revised competitive compensation rules and to regain and maintain competitive compensation for Texarkana, Arkansas civil service fire employees. Whereas the Board of Directors of the City of Texarkana, Arkansas desire to amend and establish rules to regain and maintain competitive compensation for Texarkana, Arkansas civil service fire employees to better effectuate the 1/4 cent special sales and use tax for the purpose of Texarkana, Arkansas civil service fire employees compensation increases, being initially Ordinance K 598, and maintaining competitive compensation for the civil service fire employees of Texarkana, Arkansas. Now therefore be it ordained by the Board of Directors of the City of Texarkana, Arkansas, that the following definitions and rules are enacted to carry out the purpose stated above. Section 1, definitions, base compensation. For the purpose of computing competitive compensation excludes holiday pay. B, competitive compensation. The annual base compensation for Texarkana, Arkansas civil service fire employees is competitive with the annual base compensation of civil service fire employees in the Texarkana region. Section 2, rules. A, the city shall fund competitive compensation raises for Texarkana, Arkansas civil service fire employees from the Texarkana, Arkansas 1/4 cent special sales and use tax revenues, general revenues, and/or both. B, no part of the Texarkana, Arkansas civil service fire employees' base pay shall apply to the cost of competitive compensation during his or her first year of employment. C, any years that the Texarkana, Arkansas 1/4 cent special sales and use tax generate enough revenue to cover any deficits in the total cumulative cost of competitive compensation, and competitive compensation is less than that of other civil service fire employees in the Texarkana region, the competitive compensation will be paid. Any years that the Texarkana, Arkansas 1/4 cent special sales and use tax does not generate enough revenue to cover any deficits in the total cumulative cost of competitive compensation, the city's budgeted unreserved fund balance is less than 62 days of expenditures, and competitive compensation is less of that of civil service fire employees in the Texarkana region. Civil service fire employees will not receive an increase in their competitive compensation. Any years that the Texarkana, Arkansas 1/4 cent special sales and use tax generate enough revenue to cover any deficits in the total cumulative cost of competitive compensation, the city's budgeted unreserved fund balance is more than 62 days of expenditures, and competitive compensation is less than that of other civil service fire employees in the Texarkana region. The civil service fire employees will receive a 2.5% increase in their competitive compensation. If the percentage to reach the competitive compensation is less than 2.5%, then only the percentage required to reach competitive compensation will be given. Competitive compensation will be reviewed annually during the budget process. G, the Texarkana, Arkansas Board of Directors reserve the right to issue a stipend at any time they deem necessary. H, notwithstanding anything contained in this ordinance or any ordinance amended hereby, all future increases in competitive compensation are subject to the approval of the then existing Board of Directors. Accordingly, in no event shall any specific increase in competitive compensation be implemented, due, or owed unless and until the then existing Board of Directors improves the same and implements any corresponding annual budget appropriation and expense allocations. Section 3, repealer. All ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby repealed, passed and approved this 3rd day of September 2019.
The ordinance has been read on its first reading. Do I hear a motion to have the ordinance read on its second reading?
Motion to have it read in the second reading in abbreviated form.
Okay. Second. I have a motion and a second to have the ordinance read on its second reading. Could you call the roll, please?
Hollowbush,
Yes.
Odom,
Yes.
Minor,
Yes.
Peavy,
Yes.
Teeters,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance to establish revised competitive compensation rules and to regain and maintain competitive compensation for Texarkana, Arkansas civil service fire employees.
Okay. The ordinance has been read on its second reading. Do I hear a motion, in its abbreviated form, do I hear a motion to have the ordinance read on its third and final reading?
Motion to place on third reading in abbreviated form?
Have a motion and a second to have it read on its third reading in its abbreviated form. Could you call the roll, please?
Hollowbush,
Yes.
Odom,
Yes.
Minor,
Yes.
Peavy,
Yes.
Teeters,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance to establish revised competitive compensation rules and to regain and maintain competitive compensation for the Texarkana, Arkansas civil service fire employees.
Okay, the ordinance has been read on its third and final reading. Do I hear a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and adopt a second, so to adopt, I have a motion and a second to adopt. Is there anyone here that wishes to address the board pertaining to this ordinance? Chief Fletcher.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Directors, Dr. Haskin. Talking about the ordinance we're looking at now, based on talks I've had with our personnel, they pretty much remain neutral in regard to this ordinance. It's not as good as the ordinance we currently have, but if it lets us avoid a disaster, we can accept it. I do have a couple questions in the ordinance. Starting in section 2C, it mentions total cumulative cost in base pay. Now, are we basing that total cumulative cost on every dollar we make above our 1996 pay scale? So in other words, if a firefighter made $15,000 in 96 and he makes $38,000 now, does every dollar go toward that total cost?
It's my, and Rhonda can, Ms. Henderson can help answer this, but it's my understanding that these raises are based on pay at this time, that the current hourly wage of an employee at this time, once raises go forward, a base pay raise would be given off of that base pay.
So it's off your most current salary, it doesn't go back to previous salaries?
Right, correct.
Well, what I mean, it says we can receive a raise if we raise enough funds to cover any deficits in the total cumulative cost. So we really need to know what that cost is going to be. The way I've heard it put to me, that we are like $2 million in the hole. And they've got to that number from freezing our salary at 96 levels, and everything above that goes into that cost. I don't think that's a fair way of judging it. It seems like we would have sometime or the other over 23 years, we would have got a raise. With that, even if we didn't have parity. If we could at least say any percentage raises that have been gave to non-civil service employees over the last 23 years, could we add that in and raise our baseline up? So it's a possibility that if things improve, we could possibly make enough money with our quarter cent to cover that total cumulative cost.
Mayor,
I understand where you're coming from, Chief. I can only explain to you my focus on this particular ordinance and the situation that the city has been in the past. And what we're trying to focus on, in my opinion, in this ordinance is moving the city forward where you're not really basing it in reality on what's being calculated, whether it's been enough or not, but it's going forward based on the financial condition of the city, the fund balance of the city, to where those, even if their calculations show that that the sales tax did not generate enough income, the fund balance of the city is over the 62 days, the 2.5% raise is going to be given. Providing those salaries warrant that 2.5% once that review that process is done in the annual budgeting process, to where that compared to those salaries are. And those things that have happened in the past, me personally, I'm trying to move forward to where we can give all the employees, including the non-civil service employees, raises going forward that are based on how well the city's doing. And the bottom line is that additional quarter in both of these departments is necessary. And so that's all that the ordinance is really addressing, in my opinion, is that as long as the fund balance is where it should be, then these two departments, and we ought to be able to give consideration to non-civil service as well, ought to be able to move forward based on how well the city's doing. Those calculations are still going to be there, and they've been there since 1996, but this is about moving forward with how well the city's doing, can base it on the city's revenues.
Okay. That would seem that having that part in there about the total cumulative cost would be unnecessary. No, I don't, if we're, if we're not going to look at it and figure out how we're going to accurately judge it. But moving on,
Can I help with this? My understanding, Chief, I don't mean to interrupt you, my apologies.
okay.
But I think your question may be helped by going back up and looking at the definition of competitive compensation. And it's the annual base pay for civil service fire employees, and that it's competitive with other annual base pays in the region. I think annually that will be determined. Here's what the cost of compensation is. It happens to be competitive compensation because it's looking at these other factors. And so it's not from a starting point as you're accustomed to hearing that here's what the cost of parity was. It's from, this is the entire salaries. And so if there's enough money there, either from the quarter cent or the general fund with the 62 days to meet that competitive compensation level, from zero to what that number is established by the boards, then the increase in that compensation is given. If there's not, then the proposed ordinance says, it doesn't say that you're not going to pay competitive compensation. It says you'll not receive an increase in competitive compensation. So that I think is the difference. So that thinking of the baseline is not there anymore.
So the baseline, so what we would be saying is if to meet competitive compensation next year, we needed a $300,000 and the tax generates 1.2 million, then we're good to go.
No, sir.
I think
That's not really
Okay,
how
I
it's
guess I'm,
I think to calculate
misunderstanding badly.
No, this is good. I think to calculate competitive compensation, let's compare it to regular compensation. To calculate compensation without this concept, the board would set it. There's the cost of your compensation year to year. This is competitive compensation in that the board considers this other regional factor and says, okay, here's the cost of competitive compensation. So that distinguishes it from other employees that aren't in this
Gotcha.
subgroup.
So basically where it says cover any deficits in the total cumulative cost doesn't really apply?
With the deficit and the total cumulative cost of competitive
From what I
compensation.
understand, our deficit right now is at about over $2 million. That was figured what the city has had to pay over and above what we've generated in that quarter tax over the last 23 years.
My thinking is, my interpretation of this is that, let's say the competitive compensation is set for 2020.
Right.
Okay.
And then
Let's go there.
in 2021, the board determines, here's what competitive compensation should be for that year. That difference is going to be the deficit.
Oh, so we are starting over.
Right, starting at zero.
Exactly.
We're not starting with a 2 million
That's right.
deficit.
Okay, that's right.
We're starting fresh.
Hey, I can go for that. Okay, I'm sorry that I couldn't
Oh, no,
understand.
I want you to-
I was-
yeah,
I was
like-
basically,
It's moving forward based on today's numbers.
Gotcha.
It's moving forward based
Hey,
on
hey,
today's
that's great.
salaries.
Oh.
To be able to adjust
No.
those salaries on an annual basis if they need be, if those surveys come back and say, and if the fund balance is there, that's those salaries going forward.
gotcha.
So the millions that the city's been running in the deficit for those years, from when this ordinance starts,
Right.
it's a clean slate.
Gotcha.
And here's what you make, and if the city has the fund balance, and whatever the quarter cent doesn't meet, and then based on the region, you're gonna get another 2.5% if you're not already up to that level competitive.
All right. That's better than what I was hoping for. So, okay, good to go. My second thing is on the, and this may have been answered earlier, I couldn't hear real well, but on the unreserved fund balance, when is this determined? Is that like a daily average over the preceding year or a one-day snapshot?
So Ron, do you want to answer how you calculate the fund balance?
Fund balance is typically calculated twice a year. You can calculate it annually, but you would look at the numbers almost daily in order to do that. I mean, you can look at it monthly or daily. So the easiest way is to capture a snapshot, either at budget or at audit, because those are the two times that those numbers are set. And so with this ordinance, it's based upon the budgeted fund balance. Since this will be considered annually during the budget time.
Okay, so basically it's going to be a one-day snapshot during budget time.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And again, Chief, that's the budgeted fund balance we're talking about. That's the budgeted fund balance that we're talking about.
Okay, am I getting that with the unreserved fund balance?
Correct.
Okay. So we'd basically be taking a snapshot one day of the unreserved fund balance, and that's what we would be going with.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It seemed to me that depending on what you had that preceding month could make a big deal on that. Take the Regency building in. We could run a fund balance of unreserved fund balance of 80 days all year and have something like that happen the next day, that fund balance is going down. I mean, that's a possibility at any time, but it just seems to me to be fair. And I'm not trying to create extra work for the finance director, but it seemed like you ought to have an average through the year of where it's at.
Can I answer again? For any input, the city manager mentioned budgeted because the board will set the budget. So I think maybe your concern is on December 30, money's moved out of the unbudgeted reserve fund, and it's moved down to 61 days.
No, I'm not
Or
pointing the
spin a-
finger that there's going to be something done to do that.
Okay, well,
Don't get
then
me
let's say it's
wrong.
going to be, it will be spent.
Yeah,
And so in order to incur that expenditure, the board would have to approve it, which would be an appropriate time for everyone that says, hey, we don't want to spend that money here. We want to preserve it for this purpose in the future. So they'd say, that's not the expenditure we need to make. We don't need to do that right now.
Can I go, George?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Prime example, this year, we have a budgeted fund balance of 71 days. If this ordinance was in place, this increase up to 2.5% would have already been given. The expense of the Regency building comes. That would then be brought before the board of directors, and they are aware of this one-time expense that the city would have that would drop them below that level. But because this was done during the normal budgeting process, that expense one time wouldn't affect them for 19. Now, when you look at 20, and that expenses has both of those expenses have actually been paid, that would affect your 2020 budgeted fund balance. which then would be brought before the board of directors again to make a decision if there were any issues between the competitive pay, whether or not that 2.5% will be given again on top of the previous 2.5%.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, that's a little more clear.
It is, Tyrone.
Thank you, Tyrone.
You're welcome.
All right. That's all the questions I have. Thank you, board, for your time.
Thank you, Chief.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board prior to the vote?
I hate to ask a stupid question, but 62 days in fund balance, and if the quarter cent isn't there, what kind of money are we talking? I mean, it lowers our 62 days when we give the raise out of,
Sure.
Yes.
how low can we go? What's our mandate?
Well, your fiscal policy says we can go to 60 days, but we would, be making exceptions at that time, which is what I've been talking about this whole time, is to understand, and that's one reason to pad the 60 days to 62 days. It actually has to be more than 62 days, which would probably be 63 days. But for every $50,000 that you're paying out in raises, you are reducing the fund balance by a day. And so a 2% raise is from the finance department is about $250,000 citywide. It's not quite that much for police and fire. So you are reducing those. This is something that the board would certainly have to be aware of and be conscious of, and we would have to make adjustments going forward. What we want to do is hopefully concentrate on getting those revenues up where we're not on that borderline step of 62 or 63 days. But there would be and can be any instance to where we would fall below the 60 days. And we would have to, and finance and the city manager would have to adjust accordingly in that respect.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Could you call the roll, please?
Hollabash,
Yes.
Odom,
Yes.
Minor,
Yes.
Peavy,
Yes.
Teeters,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes. Okay, the ordinance passes. Okay, moving right along to the last item on our agenda is item number 6, is to adopt an ordinance to establish competitive pay rules and regain and maintain a competitive pay package for the Texarkana, Arkansas Civil Service police employees. Finance Director Tyrone Henderson. It's basically, I'll save you some steps. This is basically the same ordinance. It's separated out. This is something different that was not done previously, where the fire will have their own ordinance, the police department will have their own ordinance. The language, if the board, I'm sure, has read these, are identical, just from police and fire. So at this time, we would entertain a motion to have the ordinance read on its first reading.
Motion to have it read in its first reading in abbreviated form.
Okay.
Second of the motion.
Call the roll, please.
Hollabash,
Yes.
Odom,
Yes.
Minor,
Yes.
Peavy,
Yes.
Teeters,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance to establish revised competitive compensation rules and to regain and maintain competitive compensation for Texarkana, Arkansas Civil Service police employees.
Okay, the ordinance has been read on its first reading. Do I hear a motion to have the ordinance read on its second reading tonight?
Motion for a second reading.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to have the ordinance read on its second reading tonight. Could you call the roll, please?
Hollabash,
Yes.
Odom,
Yes.
Minor,
Yes.
Peavy,
Yes.
Teeters,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
An ordinance to establish revised competitive compensation rules and to regain and maintain competitive compensation for Texarkana, Arkansas Civil Service police employees.
Okay, the ordinance has been read on its second reading. Do I hear a motion to have the ordinance read on its third and final reading?
Motion to have it read in its third and final reading in abbreviated form.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to have the ordinance read on its third and final reading. Could you call the roll, please?
Hollabash,
Yes.
Odom,
Yes.
Minor,
Yes.
Peavy,
Yes.
Teeters,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
an ordinance to establish revised competitive compensation rules and to regain and maintain competitive compensation for Texarkana, Arkansas civil service police employees.
The ordinance has been read on its third and final reading. Do I hear a motion to adopt the ordinance?
Motion to adopt the ordinance.
So we have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Prior to the vote of the adoption of this ordinance, is there anyone in the audience or any board member that wishes to address the board pertaining to this ordinance? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll have a motion to adopt. We have the second, don't we? Could you call the roll, please?
Hollowbush,
Yes.
Odom,
Yes.
Minor,
Yes.
Peavy,
Yes.
Teeters,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes. So ordinance passes. There's not any other items on the regular agenda. Just real quick, prior to the citizens' communication time, I would just like to say that I wanted to just take a second and thank the board for what we've done together over these last few months in getting this issue behind us and the passing of these two ordinances. I think everybody understands the severity of the issue that we were faced with. Certainly, this, to my understanding, is pretty much supported by most, which is good. This will allow the city to move forward and hopefully take care of an issue that has plagued us for quite some time. I'm also in hopes that as we begin the budget process, which we're fixing to begin here in the next month or so, that we consider these options of these pay raises and things that will be forthcoming to uphold this ordinance. But I also would like the board to really start thinking about and understanding that one of the key issues that I've discussed and talked about in this process is economic development. And we have got to try to remedy our problems by creating opportunities with economic development. We can do that with city resources, but we're also going to need to do that with city funding. And I'm hoping that the board, as we get into our budget process, will consider those options so that when we get to these issues, as Director Minor brought up, that we're not on the basis and borderline of 62 and 63 and 64 days to have to deal, with these raises that they're expected to be given. So I wanted to say thank you. I want to say that, I hope that we can continue to move forward to keep carrying the city forward. And first and foremost, it's going to start with economic development and trying to increase the revenue sources of the city. All right. At this time, we'll open for citizens' communication time. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the board at citizens' communication time?